So it dawned on me as I stepped up to the stage that I might be, I'm almost certainly the least knowledgeable person about education who's been on this stage, perhaps the least knowledgeable person about technology, and in fact, the least knowledgeable perhaps in the entire room. And usually that doesn't stop elected officials from continuing to talk in these situations. And I see no reason why today should be any different. So I'll tell you as mayor what I think is coming next. My experience with education and technology probably was most profoundly felt when I stepped into the classroom as not a professor, I guess a lecturer is what they called us at San Jose State. Back around the time when we had to give ourselves pay cuts to settle the budget, I decided I would jump into the classroom at San Jose State and teach a local government class to help pay the mortgage. And of course, they stuck me in the 7:30 a.m. class. And you can imagine a class full of hungover 19-year-olds. And that was me at 7:30 in the morning doing all I could to keep them awake. And my experience with technology typically was that everyone seemed really attentive and alert as I faced them. But then as I walked toward the back of the classroom and looked forward, I saw that every one of them with their computer screen was posting, tweeting, or otherwise engaging in some activity having nothing to do with whatever I was teaching, despite the fact that I was lecturing brilliantly. And the only way I could persuade any of them to pay any attention at all was when I lost it completely about a month into class and said, if I see any of you posting or tweeting again, I won't penalize you, I won't expel you, I won't send you to the principal's office if they have such a thing in San Jose State. I said, I will hate you for the rest of my life. And so that closed the notebooks for about a day. I certainly am no expert in the intersection of technology and learning. I do know, though, as I was thinking about the discussion today, and really wonderful discussions from the panels, I was thinking a bit about the words of Oscar Romero. Many of you know it's the 25th anniversary of his death. He was a great human rights leader in El Salvador, and well known for a famous prayer. At the end of the prayer is the line that we are prophets of a future not our own. We are prophets of a future not our own. We have a role to play here in this world. But ultimately, we're shaping a future that we don't control and we may not be a part of, but we are part of making it somehow. And that is no more true than in this context as we think about the education of our young. What could be more important for the future, for our city, for our world? And as I think about the future here in San Jose and beyond, I first want to echo the thanks to Tom Torlakson and for his leadership and the good folks at the state level who have created a Common Core curriculum that really was created an imperative to invest in technology to be able to take us to new ways of learning and teaching, ways that many of you have been experimenting with for years, but we know is critically important to bring the whole tide up. I'm looking at Chris Funk, who's been doing this for many years with many of the principals and teachers in his district. So critical that we all get on board here. And what I see coming for us here in this city is really a convergence in so many ways. First, a convergence of places of learning. We know that certainly learning should be happening in schools, but increasingly the way schools are now starting to engage in learning with flipped classrooms, with individualized learning, the fact that teachers can get immediate accountability by virtue of being plugged in and wired up, it means the student doesn't necessarily have to be right there in the classroom, right there in front of the teacher. And we know, increasingly, we see opportunities for new kinds of learning, for example, in libraries. We're seeing opportunities, for example, our library director, Jill Bourne, is dipping her toe in the water about what happens if we participate in creating or hosting open source textbooks for a community. How many schools could benefit if the city were to do that for its 19 school districts? How could we pilot a lending of laptops and iPads to engage students while they're at the library, knowing that so many are on the wrong side of the digital divide and may not have access to those tools? At our community centers, how many come to our community centers precisely to get access to the internet? How many community centers are now attracting folks just to attend the coding classes, right? You know, I thought about Tim Ritchie at the Tech Museum and the extraordinary things they're doing there. And if you haven't been there lately, you got to go. It's really fun at all ages, I can tell you. He had me over there. He stuck all kinds of things on my body, all kinds of receptors and sensors, and I don't know what they did, but it was a lot of fun. And the problem-based exhibits and everything that's happening there, it makes us start to realize that with gamification of learning, that learning is happening in malls, it's happening in Starbucks, it's happening in all these places, and the entire city can become essentially a classroom. And as we start to think about that, the convergence of all these places of learning, new possibilities start to emerge about how we can engage kids where they are rather than where they'd rather not be. And that's not meant to be an insult in any way directed toward our schools, because we know our teachers are doing a great job, but we were all kids once. And we know there might be other places in the world we'd rather be than with our rear ends in the chair in third grade on a Tuesday morning. And so there are new opportunities for us to engage with kids in learning throughout our city, throughout our world. Certainly there's a convergence increasingly now of public funding and infrastructure as well, as it should be, because I can tell you, as a person who just ran for mayor, I can't tell you how many doors I knocked on. Somebody said, well, I want you to do this or that with our schools. I'd say, great. But as Mohammed pointed out, we have 19 school districts, and I have zero power over any of them, as it should be, since I am not the education expert. And yet, we're increasingly observing opportunities to break down the silos between city and county and school district in very unique ways. Chris just spoke, Chris Funk, and we're so grateful for the leadership of the East Side Board and his leadership in pushing for an EdTech bond that we believe will significantly connect thousands of students to the digital world. Yet we know that it's not good enough for it just to be in the classrooms. And so the city is stepping in, and we're working on ways in which we can make our street infrastructure, our buildings, launching places for Wi-Fi to enable us to broaden the scale of what East Side Union High School District's doing within the classroom, how we can reach thousands more families who don't have access, an opportunity for community wireless. And if we can do it on the East Side, why don't we do it citywide? So this is going to be an exciting year for us, working in partnership with the East Side. They're really doing the heavy lifting, as you know. They passed a bond. That's important. That's critically important because you need the money. And they are the educators. But we look forward to working with them to make great things happen this year. Within the city, just this week, our council approved $2 million in funding that I recommended for an initiative called SJ Learns. And this is an idea that's really just focused on seeing if the city can re-engage in extended learning. For so many years, we had homework centers throughout the city, and it was a good concept. It was certainly helpful, but we'd like to take it a step further. All that money for homework centers largely went away in the Great Recession. And so now we have an opportunity to re-engage with schools, and hopefully in a more meaningful way. And as we're bringing in superintendents from throughout the city and foundations and educators, we're talking about how we can engage in new ways, for example, with blended learning to extend learning time at the end of the school day, and ways in which you can be very effective in doing so with extraordinary educational software that's out there that is often available free or at a freemium rate, and how we can integrate that with a curriculum and really enhance the learning experience for every student, focusing on students who are in our most challenged neighborhoods and living in poverty. The opportunities to be able to extend learning time, we know, are powerful in terms of outcomes if the learning, that is the instruction, the engaging, is done well. So there are opportunities certainly for a convergence of our places of learning, a convergence of our public institutions and our dollars. I think also really what this all comes down to is a convergence of opportunity. You know, Tim Ritchie was right. We do live in a Dickinsonian world, and in the Valley it's become more acute than ever. And we really have before us an imperative of making technology ubiquitous, because we know that is the great divide. Certainly there's money, certainly there's resources, but if we can make technology ubiquitous in a meaningful way across the digital divide, How could we solve so many challenges, so many problems that our young learners face on a daily basis? We've often heard about the study that came out in the 1990s about the fact that kids who grow up in affluent families have heard 30 million more words by the age of 3 than children living in poverty. And what we're seeing has dramatic impacts on cognitive development, right? The ability simply to hear language. We know there are grave disparities, and I don't need to recite all the statistics, but we know what third grade learning looks like right now. Reading proficiency, countywide, 40% of our third graders are not reading at proficiency. In Alum Rock, it's closer to 56%. For English learners, it's over 80% are not reading at proficiency. How could we start to change that, particularly for children who are in home environments where obviously they don't have access to English-speaking adults who are able to engage them? How could technology help? There's great opportunities for us ahead, and I look forward to working with many of you who are the experts, who do know something about education and technology, to see how the city can play a more meaningful role, how we can be partners in helping to propel this city forward as a model for the rest of the country to ensure that every child can learn. Thank you, and have a good evening.